Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. Camilla in panic after royal guard forced. Open her secret wardrobe and exposed shocking truth. There is a fresh story about a big fight that happened within the royal household. The main point was that Queen Camilla was supposed to wear the original 1953 coronation gown that belonged to the late Queen Elizabeth II during a public event. According to reports, the argument started at Clarence's house and became so bad that Princess Anne had to step in. Some senior members of the royal family thought that what happened was a breach with royal tradition that had never happened before. To halt it, a trained heritage security officer was called in. The robe, which is an important part of contemporary British history, was taken into custody and brought back to the Royal Archives at Windsor Castle. Sources believe the action stopped what might have been a big issue for how the royal collection is managed and how its history is kept. The incident started quietly the night before the Queen Consort's meticulously planned press presentation. For a short, high-impact public moment, Clarence's house had been set up with photos, a staged walkthrough, and a brief announcement at noon. The wardrobe staff was putting the finishing touches on things in her private room. They were treating the appearance as a minor part of a bigger schedule of events meant to show stability and continuity. Wardrobe lists, lighting cues, and social media guidelines were all over the dressing table like diagrams in a planning room. An internal document says that a junior chamber attendant called Elsie Grafton was completing a standard wardrobe check. Ms. Grafton had been in her job for around 3 years after working on a rural estate as a private housekeeper. She had been promoted because she was very careful and had a quiet competence that senior staff loved to depend on. That night, the communications team requested her to check over the wardrobe selections for the following day and make sure they matched with the brief they had sent her, which called for gravitas and heritage. This was terminology designed to call for something that looked and felt like continuity. She was on the suite's floor, more comfortable with seam lines and fabric weights than the messaging docks on the table. She was almost done with her checklist, which included a sapphire silk day dress, a state brocade shawl to drape over her shoulders for photos, and a pair of heritage brooches for her lapel. Then she saw something that made her stop. She touched a hefty garment bag that was hidden in a small space behind an old campaign trunk when she was picking up a pen that had dropped behind a dressing screen. The bag's position in a room where everything was in its rightful place made it seem like it had been concealed or at least quickly put away instead of following the rules. In a little exact manner, the feel of the bag made her nervous. The velvet on the outside was thicker and deeper than the velvet on any contemporary protective cover for clothes. It had a slight fragrance of cedar that was always there. Cedar is a smell that is linked to long-term preservation. But the embroidered symbol made her halt. The royal cipher E2R was sewn in fading gold thread over a crown encircled by a laurel wreath. It was clear what the symbol was. After a moment of doubt, which came from respect and prudence, she opened the bag a little. What she saw within answered questions before she could even think of them. A waterfall of red velvet, lavishly brocaded and sparkling with gold thread oak leaves, and ears of wheat fell out. The work was much like the pictures she'd seen in a history book, the depth of the pile, the way the bullion thread caught the light, and the size of the needlework. She could tell the difference between a real historical piece and a contemporary imitation, since her job was to make sure the proper clothing was in the right box on the right day. It wasn't a prop. It was an item from a famous time that she remembered. A little intuitive feeling persuaded her to show off the find instead of hiding it away again. She carefully took the bag out of its hiding location and put it on an ottoman in the room so that everybody who came in could see it. Then, remembering the rules about goods with royal insignia, she went to a safe hallway and called a certain number to reach a specific official at the Royal Collection Trust, which is in charge of taking care of and preserving the royal collection. Her message was short: a red velvet dress with the late sovereign's cipher, and what looked like coronation needlework, maybe for a public function. She didn't use the more emotional terms like precious, sacred, or unrepeatable. The report she submitted set off a discreet, urgent chain of command. Within 20 minutes, a security console at the Royal Archives at Windsor Castle flashed up with an encrypted high-priority alert. After a senior conservationist read the description, an internal examination of register entries began. By early morning, a personal assistant to the Princess Royal had been briefed. A little red folder had been made, and a royal courier had sent a sealed envelope to Wellington Barracks, where certain specialized troops keep in touch with both defense and heritage activities. The mail was sent to Sergeant Ian Merrick of the Internal Protection Liaison Corps, a small group that knows a lot about heritage protection and custody rules for important state assets. The letter had a brief plain note inside: possible unauthorized possession of state regalia scheduled for public wear. Immediate verification required. The term state regalia meant more than just its bureaucratic brevity. It may be everything from medals and scepters to clothes and fabrics that were clearly linked to the crown. Ms. Grafton had uncovered what Sergeant Merrick was now being dispatched to get the genuine robe of estate that Queen Elizabeth II wore when she left Westminster Abbey following her coronation on June 2, 1953. An artifact that is considered sacred in Crown history, stored under tight archive conditions for 70 years and by common practice never meant to be used again. Sergeant Merrick was in his mid-30s and had worked in historic security for 8 years. He had dealt with lost pieces of art auction lots that were in dispute and archaeological relics that had been lost from private homes. He was quite acquainted with condition reports, historical light meters, and the exact amount of pressure that cotton fiber gloves should have. He was also the kind of cop who knew how to be quiet and fulfill his duties. He knew how to walk without drawing attention to himself and how to seem like a contractor so that a doorman's gaze wouldn't turn into a second look. At 4:52 a.m., the envelope came with the order branded "Immediate Eyes Only, Heritage Detail Clearance, CH." Merrick had time to get ready mentally and physically on the walk from Wellington Barracks to Clarence House. He changed from his military fatigues into the gray plain uniform of his corps. This was meant to let him work in royal residences without drawing too much attention to himself. He got a small climate-controlled archival travel container out of a footlocker. It has acid-free lining biometric locks and internal sensors that keep an eye on the temperature and humidity. Those technical aspects are important copper thread. Rust's silk is weaker in high humidity, and a textile that is 70 years old is not as forgiving as a live thing. He also practiced in his head how to deal with a home issue and how to calm things down instead of making it worse by being silent. At 6:10 a.m., he was driving an unmarked Land Rover through the vacant streets, following a path that would keep him away from press lanes and get him to a side entry. If anybody asked, he would say he was a contractor managing logistics before the event. This was a believable narrative in a building where there were a dozen different service companies on any given morning. His true job was to stop and protect a national item before it might be accidentally utilized, photographed, or put in the public record without permission. There was no trouble opening the gates at Clarence House. That morning, the family was a study in practiced quiet. Florists moved in a very planned way to set up displays that would be shown on camera. Press aides carried wires and lights. The constant buzz of polite chat and quick work made the room seem like a place that could handle stress. Merrick displayed a laminated ID card with coded clearance levels. The badge's design didn't have titles on purpose so that it wouldn't broadcast his presence to anybody who wasn't supposed to know. The apartment was already bustling inside. A younger valet was putting clothes on a movable rack and making final choices for the mannequins that would be on display. There was a paper tag on an empty hanger that said, "Main Presentation Look. Heritage-focused, regal symbolism." Those dry phrases alerted Merrick that the team was not only outfitting a person, but also crafting a moment that a public audience would be able to interpret in a meaningful way. He walked through this meticulously managed setting with the trained indifference of someone whose job it is to blend in until the time comes to act. He knocked once and went inside the dressing room. The dark cherrywood panels and light lavender smell welcomed him. The chamber was quiet like a place that was used to rituals. Lady Ashcroft, the Queen Consort's hairdresser, and the person in charge of turning formal requests into clothes, glanced up from a table full of jewelry and accessories. When she spotted Merrick, her face became tense. "You aren't wardrobe staff," she remarked not unkindly, but with her guard up right away. "No, ma'am," Merrick said as he put his archive case on the floor and kept his hands in plain sight. "I'm here because the Royal Collection and Heritage Security told me to be. I need to go inside that closet." Queen Camilla came in from the next room before Lady Ashcroft could properly react. She had on a quilted morning robe and was holding a cup of coffee. There was an effortless directness to her way of speaking. She was at ease with being in the moment and could ask a question clearly and without formality. "Sergeant, is there a bomb in my closet?" she remarked half-jokingly in a way that made me want to say something funny. "Or did you get velvet mixed up with treason?" Merrick stood up straight and spoke in a calm voice. "Ma'am, Article 4, Subsection B of the 1998 Heritage Protection Act says that if you think an object with royal regalia insignia has been taken from a restricted area without permission, you may check it on site." Camilla's face changed from amused to displeased to softly offended. She remarked, "Everything in there is for a planned public appearance." "Are you saying that I stole my own clothes?" Merrick said, "I'm not suggesting anything specific, ma'am. But if what we're talking about is what we think it shouldn't be in private rotation." A guy dressed nicely and quickly walked up. He was introduced as the Queen Consort's legal attaché. "If you were worried you should have gone through household security and the Queen's personal office?" He added his voice hard with the confidence of someone who perceives himself as a guardian of the process. Merrick responded, "Which I did," pointing to the sealed package and the chain of command that had sent him on this morning's trip. "This check is allowed and has to be done quickly." "Sensitive to time," Camilla said, again looking at the clock. "Because I have to be on TV in 3 hours. Is that the problem, that someone may be able to witness a little history on film?" Merrick glanced right at her. He responded, "Because what's behind that door, ma'am, was never meant to be on camera talked about or reinterpreted." That statement made the room silent in a manner that made every little sound like the clink of a bracelet or a breath stand out. Camilla crossed her arms and looked him in the eye. "Do you know what doors you're opening by doing this?" she inquired. He gave a little nod. "Yes, ma'am." "I understand how sensitive they are." He went to the closet and opened the handles, which were made of shiny brass. Inside, everything was perfect racks of gowns sorted by color trays of crested brooches and gloves that had been properly wrapped. But the bottom compartment included something strange, a single garment bag that was heavier and older than the others, with aged velvet that was still soft. There was a weak code that said E2R. And when Merrick opened the bag, the suite smelled of cedar and chemicals used for conservation. There was no mistaking the robe itself. The deep red velvet dropped heavily from his hands. It was dense, with heavy gold bullion stitching that made olive trees and wheat ears into a border. The stitching quality, the details of the repair and strengthening, and the little linen maker's tag beneath the collar are all N. Hartnell May, 1953. Windsor Atelier mirrored what was written in the past. Queen Elizabeth II wore this robe of estate as she departed Westminster Abbey after being crowned, an object that is carefully documented with register numbers, considered to be the crown's property and not to be used again, as has been the case for a long time. Lady Ashcroft's clipboard fell to the floor and the legal attaché couldn't say anything. Camilla moved closer, not to get away, but to show that she was curious and felt like she had a right to be there. "It was meant to be a symbol," she remarked, "a statement of peace, a link between two reigns." Merrick's voice remained calm and certain. "Ma'am, symbolism can't take the place of sovereignty." He grasped a little tablet and looked at the inventory code that was sewn into the inside seam. The answer came right away: Royal Collection Restricted Item, Class 1. He tapped to start a hold, and the system replied, Hold initiated. The formal chain of custody started to come apart in real time. A piece of textile history had been saved from becoming a wardrobe statement in that bright, tight dressing room. He put a white archival sheet over a chaise couch and was ready to handle the robe the right way. Even though the garment was thick, it needed a certain lightness of touch. Merrick's hands, now covered in cotton gloves, moved slowly and carefully, like someone who was accustomed to handling delicate objects without breaking them. He folded the sleeves inward in a manner that kept the bullion thread from being too tight, and he put silk interleaves between the folds to keep the metallic trim from getting scratched. In a way, all of this careful planning was a ritual. When a costume has meant something to millions of people, it becomes a sacred item. The ritual of safeguarding shows respect for both physical and metaphorical fragility. Queen Camilla did not back down. "I didn't mean to show it off in London," she remarked. "It wasn't going to leave the building. It would only be shot and worn for a short time to show that the reigns were still going on." Merrick heard not only what was said, but also how it was spoken, a mix of explanation and appeal, a request for the reason behind the act to be understood. "Ma'am, continuity doesn't need inheritance," he said. "This is a thing with a known past. You can't use it again." Camilla's expression showed hesitation for a second. She moved to the window and looked beyond the garden to the city beyond. It seemed like she was weighing the public argument she had been given against the private legacy of another woman's one-time experience. She answered slowly, "I was told it would resonate with the public. We are living in times of uncertainty. People prefer to have real links to the past. They prefer to see the same symbols utilized carefully over and over again." "It's nice to know." Merrick's answer was calm and useful. "It also sends a message that what belonged to the Queen now belongs to someone else." The sentence's simplicity was more powerful than a formal scolding. It was a straightforward statement of principle that went beyond hyperbole. A knock on the door on purpose broke up their conversation. As Princess Anne walked in alone, wearing a fitted navy coat and clutching a thin red folder, the room appeared to hold its breath. There was no entourage or hoopla. The presence she commanded required no physical introduction. The Princess Royal's quiet power is different from a public show. She doesn't say much, but she demands a lot. She looked at the robe and then at the others who had come. She reached for the folder and pulled out a single laminated paper. She read it out loud in a voice that sounded like it had been used for a long time. "Coronation robe, state velvet, item number 004, to stay at the Royal Archives after the ceremony, not for exhibition, not to be put on, not to leave sovereign custody." The note's signature, ERS, and the way it was written made it evident that the writer wanted to keep a one-of-a-kind historical relic forever. Princess Anne addressed Camilla directly. Was this asked for through the Royal Collection? For a minute, Camilla appeared to pull herself together. She remarked, "Advisors suggested it because they thought it would make the right impression. They thought it would show respect and continuity. Who exactly recommended it?" Princess Anne pushed her eyes, narrowing. Her tone became harsher when she didn't get any names, and the legal attaché couldn't provide her a compelling chain of referral. This wasn't a choice about style. This was a break of trust. Maybe quiet, but on purpose. Camilla replied, "No cameras had caught it yet? It never left this building?" It was part of a bigger talk about regeneration, about going ahead while honoring what came before. Princess Anne didn't change her mind. She put the archiving instruction next to the robe. "This robe was worn once by one person on a day that changed everything," she added. "That was what it was for. That was its time. You can't do it again by using it again. Trying to make the moment last longer makes it less important." Camilla thought about what they said as if she were comparing them against the nice things she had been promised for the public. She said, "You can't deny that it would have been important. People love things that remind them of the past. They want to see the signs they know." Princess Anne said, "You honor what came before by leaving it as it is, not by changing its name or use. Not even in private. This kind of thing has a specific purpose to tell the story of its period, and that job was done." She looked at Merrick. "Pack it right away," she added. "I want it at Windsor before noon. Don't stop. Don't take any detours." Princess Anne's authority and the archiving mandate set the practical consequence before anybody could say anything. The legal attaché had been getting ready to file a complaint about the procedure, but the instruction made his objection go away. If the robe had been shown on video that morning without permission, it might have led to an official audit of the whole royal collection, not just one household's clothing. One thought made people pay more attention. Princess Anne picked up her folder, nodded to Merrick, and went as softly as she had come. When she left the room closed in a certain way, the fight was finished, but a new job began. The medical demanding job of keeping a piece of history safe and restoring it to its rightful owner. Merrick got to work on the practical things. He put on white archival gloves and opened up the acid-free muslin liner of his travel case. He meticulously folded the robe, putting silk barriers between the folds and tissue paper between the seams where the gold threads intersected. He used crossed velvet shackles to keep the garment from moving while it was being sent, and he put a digital verification tag on it so that its whereabouts could be followed in real time. The case's biometric locks needed a certain order for enrollment, and its internal sensors would let you know if the temperature or humidity went outside of the agreed-upon range. Conservators at Windsor would care about little procedural issues like where to put the barriers, how to fold the angles, and how to mark slight scuffs. When Merrick clicked the case shut, his tablet chimed Heritage Class, I-Transfer Initiated. Custody route from Clarence House to the Royal Vault in Windsor. Sergeant I. Merrick is the escort. He sealed the case with a tamper-resistant holographic crown emblem, which was the last tangible indication that showed how significant the event was, even to those who didn't know the whole tale. If someone tried to open the case while it was being transported, silent alarms would go out and security would rush to the scene. Merrick saw a little leather bag next to the chaise before he went. The inside was ridged and fit perfectly. There was a label inside with the letters CR on it, which made people think. He didn't talk about it. To him, professional restraint meant writing down facts instead of chattering them to the room. He told the staff that there would be no public record of the transfer until the Royal Archives wished to clarify things, and that there was no official external inquiry going on at that time. He informed them, "This item is now on permanent hold." Lady Ashcroft, who was quick to calm things down, chose a different outfit for the day, a blue coat dress with silver trim. It was historically reviewed and visually neutral, like a good understudy. "We'll change the schedule," she said. "The reserve look will work perfectly." A crew changed the lighting and moved the cues, and the house got ready for a little different version of the day. Queen Camilla, who had been prepared for a certain result, altered her mind, with the same practical decisiveness she had displayed before. The legal attaché went to a corner and started typing a message maybe to be sent later after the storm had passed. The service courtyard outside gave people a quiet route to leave the building without being seen by the reporters setting up in front. The Royal Collection's unmarked climate-controlled transport van sat still with its back doors open. Merrick strolled over the cobblestones with the locked box and into the van's hold. He scanned his biometric ID and waited for 2 green lights to show that the transfer had been registered. Princess Anne, who had planned to meet the van, got out of a car that no one else saw and spoke a quick sentence of approbation to Merrick. "You held the line when it counted," she remarked. The vehicle left and joined the traffic in London. Merrick lingered in the courtyard for a time to watch it go. He felt a little sense of pleasure that made his shoulders tense, which reminded him of the countless small decisions that make up duty. That morning, he hadn't stopped a normal crime. He had followed a rule: certain events in history can only happen once, much like natural occurrences. He had kept a one-time event from being seen as modern theater. In a few days, people would be talking about the issue and asking who had advised using the robe, if the staff had been misled, and whether a contemporary advisory committee had gotten the line between homage and appropriation wrong. Some people in the House could have felt the measure was too harsh, while others would have been glad that a possible constitutional disaster had been avoided. For Merrick and Princess Anne, the task that morning was clear. Certain things are less like textiles and more like testimony, and part of the job is to recognize and safeguard that testimony. The morning impacted Elsie Grafton's employment in minor but lasting ways. She was the junior attendant who found the body. Later, she came back with an official report that would be included in the robe's conservation file and reviewed by curators. A senior staff member would gently applaud her for doing what she had been taught to do: to notice, report, and handle things with the proper respect for goods carrying a sovereign cipher. A little bit of acknowledgement might be all the comfort she needs in her career. In the days that followed, Queen Camilla was quiet and introspective. She hadn't tried to take the object. She was arguing for a particular type of continuity in public leadership. The event made a clear line and maybe taught a lesson. Symbolic gestures have importance in the public eye, but so does the historical accuracy of singular defining events. At Windsor, the vault got the robe and the conservators carefully and thoroughly documented it. Under regulated lighting, detailed photos were taken, and condition reports were updated and added to the robe's permanent dossier. The transit tag was recorded, the case was put back in a vault with temperature control, and the official entry was marked with the day's chain of custody. For the curators, the incident would be an administrative case study: how easy it is in an era of intense image-making and rapid messaging for the lines between commemoration and appropriation to blur, and how necessary it is to have protocols robust enough to stop mistakes before they become precedents. There are more tales underlying the little part of royal life where the event happened than a single written account can tell. It is a location where people perform rituals and improvise, where advisors have diverse ideas about history, and where staff members' job is to turn personal preferences into public statements. The events of the morning brought such conflicts to light and settled them in favor of conservation. In the end, the robe stayed where people who safeguard such things thought it should be safe unco-opted and safe from being changed by any one moment. The event itself, the coronation, and all its cultural significance stayed in people's minds as a past that could be honored without being relived. The incident was not simply about fabric and thread for those who saw these tiny administrative rituals happen. It was a reminder that institutions last, because people pay attention to the small things, are willing to enforce rules that seem old-fashioned when compared to immediacy, and take seriously the small things that protect larger stories. There are certain things that can only happen once. The morning at Clarence House was a good example of this simple but strong truth. The robe was packed up, driven away, and shut up with the people whose duty it is to keep things whole. People who knew both the short-term and the long-term resolved a debate over symbolism and inheritance in a private room. They changed their attire and postponed a public appearance. As Sergeant Merrick would say, the quiet win was not a headline, but a conservator's report. The thing stayed the same, and its history was not changed by the ease of a single contemporary snapshot. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and share it.